President Donald Trump is on the second leg of his 5-country Asia tour. He's in South Korea. There, the president toned down his harsh rhetoric on North Korea and signaled a willingness to negotiate over its nuclear program. The president said he's optimistic that they can make a deal, but warned U.S. military options are not off the table.
Today, I hope I speak not only for our countries, but for all civilized nations when I say to the North, do not underestimate us and do not try us. We will defend our common security, our shared prosperity, and our sacred liberty. We did not choose to draw here on this peninsula. This magnificent peninsula, the thin line of civilization that runs around the world and down through time. But here it was drawn, and here it remains to this day. It is the line between peace and war, between decency and depravity, between law and tyranny, between hope and total despair. It is a line that has been drawn many times in many places throughout history. To hold that line is a choice free nations have always had to make. We have learned together the high cost of weakness and the high stakes of its defense. America's men and women in uniform have given their lives in the fight against Nazism, imperialism, communism, and terrorism. America does not seek conflict or confrontation, but we will never run from it. History is filled with discarded regimes that have foolishly tested America's resolve.
Oh, kids, do we have a treat for you? Our CBS News chief White House correspondent and the host of the Takeout podcast, Major Garrett. He's in Seoul, South Korea. Hello, Major.
Hello, Steve.
What is give us your initial thoughts of the president's remarks.
Well, it's been an interesting day here in Seoul, South Korea. Just after noon here in Seoul, we woke this morning with the news that there was a surprise maneuver by the president to go to the demilitarized zone separating North and South Korea. Moon Jae-in, the president here in South Korea, was waiting for the president. That would have been, Steve, an historic photo opportunity. The U.S. president alongside the South Korean president staring down the menace from the North Korea did not happen. Fog forced Marine One to divert and come back here to Seoul, and then place even more attention on the remarks the president just gave before the National Assembly, the first American president to address what is the South Korean parliament since Ronald Reagan. And in that speech, the president made it clear that though there is a pathway for a diplomatic resolution, it comes with a high price for North Korea. Complete dismantling of all nuclear weapons and an end to all ballistic missile technology testing. That's something the North Koreans have already ruled out, said they would never accept. And so even though there is some softer rhetoric here, and at least the idea conceptually of a way out, much of the president's speech was about the necessity of resolving this issue once and for all and leaving the very clear impression that military options are not only on the table, but being reviewed rapidly and regularly to see what options are available to confront North Korea, because as the president said, this administration is different than past administrations. And there should not be in the North an impression that this administration is in any way weak or intimidated. That left a clear impression here in Seoul that the president was, if not warning South Korea and North Korea that war could come, certainly not ruling out that possibility.
I want to unpack that a bit. So the president said now is the time for strength. If you want peace, you must show strength. But earlier he said that the North Korean regime had interpreted past restraint as weakness. Unpack that for us a little bit.
Well, the president's interpretation, and it's held by those who are closest to him, Defense Secretary Mattis, his National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, and even the Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, believe they have come to this point where the North Korean regime is so much more rapidly testing nuclear weapons and extending the reach of its ballistic missile technology that this is now not just a theoretical threat to the United States mainland and its allies, Japan and others, but a genuine threat that is nearer than it's ever been and must be confronted now. And there are ongoing discussions within the administration about a preemptive military strike, doing something even before there is an aggressive move from North Korea. Just last week, Steve, in open testimony before the United States Senate, the defense secretary was asked, is there a scenario under which the United States would contemplate and possibly carry out a nuclear attack on North Korea? The defense secretary said, well, if we detected North Korea was about to launch something we thought could reach the mainland, that's a scenario we might, in fact, look at and then deploy a preemptive nuclear strike. These things are now being talked about openly, and it is a huge conversation throughout South Korea. Many people will tell you that for years South Korea has lived with this ongoing rhetorical menace from North Korea, and over the years developed a kind of nonchalance about it. Much of that nonchalance has evaporated. There is a real sense that this confrontation, one way or another, is coming. And one thing President Trump did say at the tail end of his remarks to North Korea, there is a much brighter future for you. You can have lots of things, including peace and possibly prosperity, and deal with South Korea and the United States and the international community, but on one condition and one condition only: give up your nuclear weapons.
Major, where in the world are you and the president going next?
We leave very soon for Beijing, and awaiting the president in Beijing, not only President Xi Jinping, but what the president of China has described as, and those who are familiar with the takeout will appreciate this, a state visit plus.
Ooh.
Which is kind of like medium plus, you know, the way I like to order my steak. I digress ever so briefly. But a big state visit for the president, huge celebration to welcome the president. Many nations, and we saw this in Japan, we saw it here in South Korea, have interpreted that one of the ways to best deal with President Trump is with a huge celebration, a lot of pageantry that sort of underscores their respect for him and his office. The Chinese have promised exactly that. But after the pageantry is over, the president and President Xi are going to have some very intense conversations about the next steps with North Korea. And in his remarks today, the president called out China and Russia specifically. Implement UN resolutions as rapidly as you can. Diplomatically isolate North Korea. No serious nation, the president said, can tolerate, support, or in any way advance the interests of North Korea. Because if you do, you are leading the world into a very dark and dangerous place. And that's the message the president will deliver to President Xi in Beijing.
Major Garrett.